I haven't looked at our talking points or questions. What are we talking about?
Dinos.
That's something I don't need any briefing on. Let's talk about dinosaurs.
Let's talk about fucking dinosaurs, huh?
Well, let's try and swear as much as possible in this episode. Let's talk about dinosaurs. Cameron.
Fucking dinosaurs. Yeah.
Give us the origin story of dinos again. I know you've told it many a time, but I want to hear it fresh. How did this dinosaur story start?
Well, to be honest with you, I feel like the dinos, I don't even really know at this point. I've told the story so many times. I'm like not really sure what's real and what isn't. But we were sitting around. It was like Earth Day a few years ago. We're all feeling pretty like scared and generally hopeless about the state of the world. And we or somebody had this idea about a bunch of dinosaurs sitting around a dive bar, just cranking beers, denying climate change as the meteor came streaking across the sky to snuff the dinos out. And then we're like, we should make an animated show about that. And we're like, do we know how to make an animated show? And we're like, nah, let's do it. I'll tell you what was a wild day, though. I was on the roof of the climbing gym here in Williamsburg, and it was the first time that I remember seeing this, like all the smoke from the LA wildfires had like rolled all the way across the country, and it was so thick that you couldn't even see across the East River to Manhattan. I was like, yeah, seems like the dinos might have something to tell us about what to do in this situation. You know what I mean? They know their way around this one. So yeah, it's pretty much like the egg from which dinos hatched, this sort of sense of fear and, worry, but also it's like, this is the world that we live in, right? So we have to figure out how to keep existing in it and like living these like fun and meaningful lives and shit. Then again, dinosaurs are pretty hard to get into any interviews to talk about their experience.
I still love telling people the original story of like, you walk into a bar, you sit down, you look to your left, there's a bunch of dinosaurs sitting there, and they're kind of like, hey, human, like, yeah, extinction's real. You should probably pay attention to what's going on while they're hammering some beers, as you said. And I've like, as a premise, I've found that so amusing and funny. And what's interesting is because this project has been a couple of years in the making, the world's chaos has not calmed. It's increased, and it's become more chaotic and almost, I know it sounds wild, but like it's almost become more humorous the wilder it's got. And I think coming back to what you said, which is like in all of this chaos, how do we still find the opportunity to laugh while we as humans can kind of speak up or put our point of view into the world? You're always a bit contained by like which bubble you're in or which side you're on or, which group you're talking to at any given time. Whereas when it's dinosaurs that are punching left, right, up and down, I just love this idea of like no rules, freedom to create, write, poke fun and laugh in the realities of what the world.
Yeah. I think that is like, it is sort of this really cool, I hesitate to say it so obtusely, but like modular prism, right? That you can sort of like take any of the issues of the day, filter it through dinosaur consciousness, which ironically like takes the teeth out of the conversation. It's a way that we can like unpack all of these questions that we have, right, without the pressure of relating to humans in that, right, which just adds like a very understandable like element of weight and gravitas to a conversation like this. But when there's stoned dinosaurs talking about it, it's a little bit easier to a little bit easier to get into and approach, I think, with like a sense of openness and humor, not just about like the world, but also like yourself and the like your place in it as it's all unfolding. I don't know. It's a funny thing.
Do you remember, Cam, like when this all came about?
I mean, this came about not long after COVID. I think it was 2021 or 2 when we started just like, pulling this idea out of the ether. It's funny, right? Because I feel like we've all gotten a little bit more used to the chaos. It used to be more shocking, right? It used to be like we were so strung out on the news all the time and so just torqued up. And again, not to say that that's not still going on, but I think this was, created in response to that sense of like, how will we ever find our way out of this moment of like chaos and uncertainty and just like everything feeling like it's falling apart.
Tell us about this, like for those people who've come across this minute, like I've had probably 3 or 4 people just write to me like, can you explain what on earth this is and what you're up to? And like, I know that I'll give a bit of context, but like Convicts as a company, we always want to find our original voice. And it's been part of our model and approach, as a creative studio to always have a chunk of our time put into originals. And, I think the reason we do that is it's an opportunity for us to be original, complete creative freedom, make something without any rules. Arguably the most fun part of our day is the opportunity to do these projects. But just maybe give us a bit more of an explanation of like what happens, why, and walk us through what an original piece of content is and how this is going to kind of like, how you see it living in the world.
Yeah. So Save the Dinos it's designed as an animated series, and it follows these 3 friends, Brecky, Snarf, and Lulz, who are partying at Clawchella, the finest music festival in the world of the dinos, West Pangea. They're doing drugs in the cave, the rave cave in the center of the festival. When the meteor hits, they miraculously survive. They're so high they don't know that the apocalypse has happened at first. But then as the tech overlord of West Pangea, Gark, comes in with his entourage, they realize that something is amiss. They're the only ones who know the truth about what happened as Gark spreads disinformation and sort of like fuckery to gain power over this sort of dissolving dinosaur world for his own ends. They're the only ones who like know this truth. They know what happened, and so they have to cross the dinosaur continent back to their home in Green Rock City to basically like warn all dino-kind about like Gark, the apocalypse, all of that. And so along the way, they're bickering and partying and just being like messy 23-year-old dinosaur people, but like they link up with a plesiosaur prepper. They go to a lava skiing resort full of influencers who are stoked about the rising property values due to the excellence of lava skiing in the apocalypse. There's like murderous hippie cults. There's dinosaur mega churches. There's like meteor awareness marches. It really does sort of take the way that we've always thought of it, right, is like taking these discrete and recognizable like aspects of our reality and just sort of like transposing them onto this dinosaur reality so that we can like not even just poke holes in them, but I think examine like why people respond to these things in uncertain times. You know what I mean? And like how we find meaning, right, in the face of chaos. And I think that that's really the crux of the story, right, is like how these 3 young dinosaurs are figuring out how to grow up and live life in the end times, right? Which seems a lot like being a young adult in the 2020s, So that's the arc in a nutshell.
What's important to, a series like this in terms of sort of like, message, friendship, hope, purpose? What did you learn from writing it? And what do you feel like people will get from watching it?
Interesting. I guess I would sort of hope that people would get sort of the same thing I got, but people who are watching it would get the same thing that I got from writing it, right? Which is sort of like, I love this old Ken Kesey quote, right? Once you lose your laugh, you lose your footing. And I feel like this show for me, in the same way that like, The Cure each week forces me to look sort of optimistically at the events of the day, I think this forced me to find the humor in otherwise humorless situations. And, again, it's like life is really short and it's very precious, and we don't get any do-overs, and it's like, it's not, it's something not to be taken lightly, but it's also something that must be taken lightly, right? With lots of laughter and lots of like joy. And that is, again, increasingly short supply these days. And so hopefully this show would open some space for people to feel that.
What, like, I'm interested in sort of like hopefully like a short answer for this question.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for me. Yeah.
What's the parallel? It's not the story of one, right? It's the story of some. What's the parallel from the three hero characters and your experience with Convicts?
It's actually just a huge takedown of Convicts on the inside. They're based on all of you. Nah, it's hard to say. You know, it's like I feel like these characters. I mean, I kind of think that creativity is we're more like this veers, but I think creativity is more received rather than generated. Right? I don't know really what that means, but we're sort of like transistors for it. And so it's like hard to say where the characters come from, right? But as you sort of like get these ideas and then put, I guess, scales and teeth on them in this case. Convicts, I think that thematically, you know, the whole ethos of the show, right, is so reflective of our ethos at Convicts, right? Like positivity, I think, rambunctiousness, a sort of a cheek, you know. The characters, I think, embody tropes, but also in the same way that we have to be conscious with people, like they're much vaster than that. You know what I mean? They have so much life inside of them. And so I think that is really like God, that was a shit answer. That's what I think that was. That was a shit answer. That was not a short answer at all, was it?
I like it. I think like what I take from it is like the experience, and I don't know if it's just Convicts, but just life in general, you know, living this past decade and being afforded the opportunity to make, is you just kind of like gathering all of that stuff and original projects. I remember telling you at one point, like, make it more fucked up. Like they do the dinosaurs have an orgy? Do they eat each other? Like, there are no rules, and that's kind of like the I guess the fun of the original project is like you get to, like you said, gather everything, be a bit of a transistor, and just let it go somewhere that isn't doesn't have as much of an agenda behind it.
Is there not something that's sort of like, because the metaphor that I was going after was like, you know, everyone needs a reason to kind of like keep going, right? And like, and this story of friendship and kind of like at once kind of, you know, through friendships you become close and you criticize and you kind of like joke and you downplay and maybe you separate but you come back. There's something interesting about the characters that sort of like there are very much kind of molecules of kind of like the company that got input into the story that sort of like feel as though maybe they're just kind of like, you know, true to us and we are the only one that care, no one else does. But you know, I do love the idea that throughout the course of kind of like this broader kind of environmental cataclysmic story, there's kind of like these other cultural nuances and subcultures and all of these things. But at the core of it, there's kind of like friends who ultimately kind of like help each other get to a place that feels kind of meaningful, and that in and amongst humor, drugs, orgies, and snacking on a leg or two.
Like all good friends do. You know?
Yeah, it's a killer story.
No, and look, man, it's like I do. It's the truth is like really like at the end of the day, all we have is other people. You know what I mean? Nothing is really worth anything without others, right? And it's so like deeply ingrained in us that we don't even notice it. And it's like I think that, you know, all of us have like gone through these crazy ass times, and it's always the people around us that like get us through it. You know what I mean? And listen, I'm not totally sure that Triceratops, Brontosauri, I don't know, and T-Rexes like got along as closely back in the day, but it is like you know, I think that they're different. I think it shows sort of the tapestry of friendship, right? That we all weave, the different people and tastes and funkinesses that we all like, not just share, but sort of interlock with one another in relationships, right? And so, yeah, that's what else do we have other than friendship? You know what I mean?
I don't know. I prefer to drink alone these days.
Yeah, well, listen, that's one way to do it, as that is.
Just funnily enough, Cam, I like kind of interested to know the reaction from your family.
Oh, no, they haven't seen any of it,
Parents.
for sure.
The funniest, I guess, experience I've had with it is my kids are obsessed with it. And it's just like they don't understand it, but they just love it, and we'll watch it on repeat. And I have to turn the sound off, obviously, but they will watch this thing just like 40 times because they just love it so much. And I've watched Indy now. She likes the dancing, so she's always trying to copy the dance moves of the rave cave ravers and part of the thing, and like it's really funny how you never know kind of like what it is that makes something click, but there's something there that's caught the attention. Certainly my 5-year-old daughter.
I mean, who knows? It could be dinosaurs. It's the cocoa melon for the apocalypse. That's the thing. Honestly, my family hasn't seen it. They'd be like, wait, what do you do at work? what are you talking about?
If Save the Dinos was like a fast food restaurant, what would be the meal?
Probably a Crunchwrap Supreme from Taco Bell, but made with like swamp ferns and like dino meat and like lava queso and I don't know, maybe some mammal fur in there too. But yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. Definitely Taco Bell though. I feel like Save the Dinos is definitely it's definitely Taco Bell. Like
what's the one that's open late night? Jack in the Box is a pretty good fix at the end of the night.
yeah. I don't have much of a relationship with Jack in the Box, unfortunately. I don't know if that was regionally in North Carolina. I was a big cookout guy. That was the late nights. But I'm telling you what. Also, you want to talk about some like primeval dinosaur type shit? Is cookout at 2:30 in the morning? You got like fights between people throwing milkshakes at each other.
Well, if you had to explain, like one of the things I feel like when you're trying to explain. I've told people, I'm like, things is somewhere between South Park and The Simpsons and the Flintstones, or like if you had to explain where you see this living in like an animated world, how would you define it?
I mean, the Flintstones is a pretty obvious parallel, right? Because of that like Neolithic take on modern technology. So I think the frame is very Flintstonian, like the dinosaurs have smartphones made out of rocks and, everything is powered by swamp gas and whatnot. But I also think that like BoJack Horseman is sort of the flip side of the comparison there, right? Because that is like, it's funny and it's grim and it's dark, but it does have like a pretty deep pathos as well. You like kind of start rooting for this asshole horse and seeing, like his pain as quite human. And so I think that it's really in there. I don't think it's as cynical as some of the other animated shows out there. It's not just jokes. There's sort of a back end to it as well that I think is, are like really, again, it's sort of like with humor, it's a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down.
Look, it's interesting. There's this underlying theme of climate, funnily enough, in the show, right? Because the climate's changing, the world's ending. There's going to be these layers, and I think, from our team, I'm sure there's some direction on kind of where we sit on certain arguments globally, whether it's climate or immigration or human rights. But I think one of the things that I've appreciated about it, and it'll come down to the writing in the end, is that it's going to be important to punch left and right, and like in the end that it's a spoonful of sugar, like we're going to make this funny, but we're not going to hold back the punches, probably from all corners.
Yeah, no, and I think that like again, it's like we say at Convicts, never serious, always sincere, right? And I think that the importance of like laughing at yourself, right, and not taking yourself too seriously, I think ultimately like strengthens whatever argument you're trying to make and the way that you approach it and like your beliefs. Like if you can, right, they say like the genius can hold two opposing ideas in their mind at once without discrepancy or something like that. I'm not a genius, so I can't remember the quote, but and I think it's some of that, right? Like the more that you can like laugh at yourself, the stronger. It's like the willow tree bends, but like a stiff piece of wood breaks. Right? It's like you want to be, and the more we can laugh at ourselves, I think it gives us more like flexibility to move through the world and get done what we need to get done and accomplish what we need to do.
Awesome. Well, let's get it out there and keep that momentum going. And I don't know, do we want to have is there any interesting kind of call to action? Save the dinos, like you said, Tom, Save the Dinos needs you.
Yeah. You must help save the dinos. All right. We're looking at you, development executives.